Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier, with a presentation looking at one of the most evil acts in history, the Holocaust. Once the Germans conquered Poland, then Western Europe, and then much of Russia and the Baltic states, what the Nazis called the Jewish problem considerably increased in scale. Where the Nazis had had hundreds of thousands of Jews in Germany to deal with, they now had millions. One of the early answers in Poland was to force the Jews into ghettos, with walls built to keep them in, and only starvation-level rations allowed. It was a way of containing the Jews, removing them altogether from society. Though able-bodied Jews were used for slave labour, marched in and out of the ghetto for their day's work, the ghettos were also a way of killing the Jews off. Malnutrition and disease were rife, and in such overcrowded conditions, diseases quickly spread. In the summer of 1940, the Nazis resurrected a plan that had first been mooted back in the 1920s, to transport Jews to Madagascar. But when the Germans failed to knock Britain out of the war, and Britain took Madagascar for the Free French, the plan was no longer viable. Then, in 1941, the Nazis invaded Russia. Faced with the greatest number of Jews thus far, their solution was to shoot them. Special units of Einsatzgruppen, killing squads, which followed behind the advancing troops, would have mass graves dug, often by the victims themselves, where they would then be shot and buried. Sometimes the German killing squads would be helped by the local population. As many as 700,000 Jews were murdered this way. But the Nazis saw it as an inefficient means of murdering the Jews en masse. Costly in time, in manpower, and in bullets. For the Nazis, a more efficient way had to be found. Now at this point, the Nazis had also developed mobile gas vans to kill the Jews, and it was the use of gas that would lead to the idea of the death camps. In January 1942, leading Nazis met to discuss the problem, as the Nazis saw it, at Wannsee, then a picturesque suburb of Berlin. The meeting was organised by Adolf Eichmann and chaired by Reinhard Heydrich, though it would have needed Hitler's say-so to take place. Here was where the Nazis planned their final solution to the Jewish problem. And again, such a policy could only have come from Hitler. Either a direct order or inferred from conversations that this is what he wanted to happen. Heinrich Himmler, as head of the SS, was the man in charge of the whole operation. Eichmann dealt with a lot of the detailed logistics, including the transportation of Jews and the systematic looting of their possessions. Heydrich, as Himmler's right-hand man until he was assassinated in June 1942, was responsible for the camps, as well as for the Jews in Poland. The final solution was an unprecedented operation on an industrial scale. It operated from 1942 to the end of the war, though its peak period, when half the victims died, was from the spring of 1942 to February 1943. Death camps were built with gas chambers and crematoria big enough to deal with the numbers they would be receiving. Jews from all over Europe had to be identified and records kept of them. And again, it has to be acknowledged that local populations often helped. The Jews had to be transported to collection points and then onto the death camps. Transport would be organised to get the Jews from across all of Germany's occupied territories to the camps. This at a time when Germany was fighting a desperate war with the Russians. On arrival at the camps, most of the Jews would almost immediately meet their deaths in the gas chambers. Those past fit enough for work on nearby sites, usually in war-related industries, would survive until unfit to work, when they would be sent to the gas chambers too. In this way, either shot or sent to the death camps, something like 6 million Jews perished. In total, the numbers murdered at around 6 million was a staggering figure. Think of the population of your hometown or city, even if you live in a village. Now multiply the population of your town until you reach 6 million, or else divide the 6 million figure into it. That's how many human beings perished in the most horrible of ways at the hands of the Nazis. Do please remember, these were people. But look at it another way. On this slide, as well as the numbers that were murdered in the biggest of the death camps, are the percentage figures of those who perished in some countries. Think how close the Nazis got to the total extermination of an entire people. So, a sombre presentation. History is always about people, and you know we only live once. Something we should always have in mind in our history lessons. And something you might want to note, January the 27th is Holocaust Memorial Day. It was the day that Auschwitz was liberated. But in an effort to end on a more positive note, something I have learned from history is that the human spirit is incredibly strong, and we can bounce back. I'm not suggesting for a minute that it was easy, but Jewish communities around the world remained strong in the wake of the Holocaust, not least its survivors. Something I think is truly astonishing. As always, I do thank you for listening. Good luck with your studies. Cheers.